Welcome back to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. Hey everybody, I am your host today, Paige Niedringhaus. I am a lead software engineer at the startup Allspice, and we're back with another panel episode where we'll be talking about coding outages, layoffs, and autonomous coding agents and doom. But before we get into it, let's welcome our panelists. We have Jack Herrington, the blue-collar coder on YouTube and also a co-host of the Front End Fire podcast.
Yeah. Hey, Paige. How you doing?
Glad to have you back, Jack. Good to be here. We have Paul Mikulskis, a PodRocket host and YouTuber.
Hi. Happy to be here.
And we have Noel Minshaw, a software engineer at LogRocket. Glad to have you, Noel.
Yeah, happy to be here, Paige.
All right. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about is coding outages, layoffs, and the retention crisis that seems to be happening in the tech industry. The past few weeks have brought about a reckoning for the ship faster with AI era of software development. Amazon has mandated that 80% of its engineers use internal AI coding tool Kiro weekly, and within months, 2 major outages struck its North American marketplace in a single week. The first was on March 2nd. This generated around 1.6 million errors and 120,000 lost orders. And then 3 days later, the second outage caused a 99% drop in orders, resulting in 6.3 million lost transactions. Amazon has since launched a 90-day code safety reset across 335 critical Tier 1 systems, which require dual reviewer approval for any code changes. Amazon disputes that the AI-written code was the direct cause, saying that the incident stemmed from process failures, but the timing and scale have made the story impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Atlassian has announced significant layoffs as part of an AI push, and a Forbes piece this week put a name to something that many teams are quietly experiencing, a retention crisis driven by engineers who feel their craft is being devalued by vibe coding culture. So, the first question for the panel is that Amazon says that this was a process failure and not an AI failure. Do you think that distinction matters, or does AI made it faster and easier to make catastrophic changes and mistakes at scale tell the real story?
I definitely think that it was an AI problem. Like, if you had just not a lot of these and then you suddenly have a lot, yeah, I can totally understand where they're coming from. When I do a lot of this vibe coding stuff, I'm not 100% always checking the results. And the weird thing to me is that Kiro in particular, that particular IDE, actually enforces the Amazon process all the way through. And I'm just surprised, actually, a little bit that this has happened, because that Amazon process is very heavy in terms of planning, and there's reviews of those plans. It's a pretty heavyweight tool. I'm surprised. It's not like your usual vibe coding tool.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if it were, like, there's no way Amazon comes out with the headline that, oh yeah, we vibe coded this and broke something, right? So like, of course not. Like, we would never hear that in a million years. It's hard to say, I guess, because I think varying degrees, different parts of the stack and architecture in general and how teams interact with them, there's just that kind of whole loss of context on code and what's happening. So I feel like it could be like, even if a human wrote this line, I feel like one could still be like, yeah, but like they were integrating against a service or modifying a code base that had been vibed. They didn't have as good of a grasp on it as they did before. But I think that these kind of issues are going to increasingly be inseparable from process. Like, how does your team understand your code base? Like, how are changes made? What's the testing look like? I think like that kind of is the process, and the new process is determining what kind of context humans have versus your agents. So I don't know.
They're very intertwined. It is process, it is AI. If you look at organizations at scale, that are doing this correctly or arguably correctly, like Stripe came out with a great blog post about their minions. It's a 2-part blog post. I recommend everybody read it if you really want to see how this is being done at scale. But for them to make changes, it's not just the IDE. They have a whole process architecture about how agents hand off and then go to review. And I'm sure Amazon had a flavor of that. But if it doesn't match the organizational need, of course, it's not going to work. And I would consider that process. Like, how you're designing the harness. Everybody at that scale needs a custom harness, realistically. So yeah, I feel like, same as you know, like they're inseparable, one in the same. Maybe they're not at the end of the day in the way we tackle and address these issues, but like right now it's so murky that they feel one the same. Good job, Amazon. I guess that worked as an excuse. Like you sold me, sure.
I gotta say, I wonder if, I don't know about you all, but like I tend to do multiple things at one time because I'm waiting for an agent to do its stuff. And so it's okay, do I want to practice guitar or do I want to go and fire up 3 other agents doing 3 other things? And that kind of like multitasking / process switching isn't particularly ideal for kind of keeping your eye on the ball of a particular feature. And I think sometimes I have like, where was I with this? That kind of like...
Oh, yeah. It's like context switching. It's like you fire off an agent to perform a task, right? It's like, well, I could just sit here and twiddle my thumbs. I could go kick something else up. But any option you do, there's going to be new stuff. Anything other than sitting there and staring at the ceiling or the little quad icon do its little dance thing. It's like you're going to lose some context as you're going to start paging other stuff in. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't think the distinction really matters because like you were saying, the process is AI at this point. And whether we like it or not, we've intertwined the two so closely that, you just have to figure out what happened and be able to debug it. And that's the hard part, is that we have less of an understanding of the code that was written because most likely we didn't write it. So figuring out how to fix it or undo it or bring back up whatever got deleted takes longer. Hopefully an agent can help with that as well, but it's not always going to be the case.
I think it also just points to how important harness engineering is as a practice. It's like there's prompt engineering, context engineering. It really comes down to harness engineering, and you're becoming a process pipeliner for an organization. And I've seen more and more like people talking about this, memorializing this as a real thing, harness engineering, because it really is just a flavor of platform engineering. And people don't see how deep the iceberg goes on. If you want to use these tools at scale effectively, you need that discipline and you need to be serious about it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of just misalignments on where the org is trying to go versus how much they actually need to invest. Because they're like, we're spending money on AI. Jack was joking before we got on this podcast. How many tokens are you spending per month? That's a real thing. That's a real metric that organizations are paying attention to see what this conversion is. That's half the story. Are you doing the platform engineering? Are you doing the harness engineering? Are you getting somebody that knows how to connect systems responsibly? And it's this Amazon story is just the beginning of companies going, oh yeah, we do the tokens.
Right.
Wrong thing.
And if they do the tokens, then it encourages you to not twiddle your thumbs, right? In order to get up to those kind of token levels, you need to have 4 or 5 of these agents running simultaneously. How do you track that? How do you monitor that? Nobody's... at least there's no course that I've seen that talks about this stuff. And it's all just anecdotal. As you say, there's folks out there who are like, this harness is the bomb, or this meta harness that it can run multiple sub harnesses and sub agents. And you're like, what? This entirely new field of dealing with all this is 3-6 months old for a lot of folks.
One of the things that the Forbes piece argues is that companies that are leaning hardest into vibe coding are losing some of their best engineers. Do you think that is the case? Do you think that there are particular engineers who are staying versus leaving?
Let's say you have 10 great engineers, okay? And then this vibe coding thing comes. You're always going to have somebody who's a thought leader in a group. That's just a human principle of organization. You're always going to have a thought leader. You're always going to have somebody that just rises to the occasion of being the technical owner because they thought something was interesting and everybody starts to gravitate. There's always going to be an engineer that is still designing and architecting and being creative and leading how we're developing the harness because that's going to change every 3 months as the models change. There's always going to be real engineering. That doesn't mean to say, though, I think I'm seeing the other 7 engineers on the team now, instead of their gasoline from their brain needing to do creative boots on the ground coding work, there may be siphoning off of the idea faucet of the thought leader and then being told to orchestrate agents. So are they just going to leave and it's, this organization's dried up and rotting? No, you're still going to get the great engineers and they're just going to have more creative time, arguably. It's just that the surface area for how many roles can slot into that type of persona will be squashed and minimized. You're going to have 1 or 2 thought leaders orchestrating work to the rest of the folks versus everybody kind of working on those really intelligent, fun to solve, honestly, problems. Just role compression.
Yeah, I can certainly just see it, the human standpoint of, it used to be one of those things where you would, I think about it as climbing a mountain, right? So I got this thing that I want to build. And it takes forever to build it, and you're really proud of it, and you feel a sense of pride and ownership because you handwritten or used tab completion or whatever, put it all together, and then you get up to the top of that mountain, you're like, yeah, look at me, I did it, this is great, and you feel that sense of pride. Whereas AI development is like a helicopter, and it just kind of like drops you off the top of the mountain. You're like, oh, I guess I did it, yay, me. Okay. And there's not that sense of satisfaction. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that if you were an engineer who was not into the AI thing, you may have already left the workforce if that was an opportunity for you, or if that was a possibility that you were entertaining. If you were an engineer who'd been in this for 20 or 30 years and you were like, AI is not the way I want to go, I think you may have just retired out of it at this point. I don't know necessarily like what you're going to do. Maybe you're going to go do something completely different. I think that's a lot of people's choice now, is that they're just like, I'm done with the tech industry. I want to go run a coffee shop or have a bookstore or be an electrician or a plumber. I think people are reevaluating a lot of what they want to do, because as engineers, a lot of us get, like Jack said, that sense of satisfaction from doing something really hard, and the time that it takes to get there, and the knowledge and the expertise required to build something good or something that we care about. And yeah, AI takes away a lot of that because you can prompt your way to it, and you didn't actually write any of the code that does the thing that solves the problem. So yeah, there's less sense of ownership or less sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, satisfaction. Exactly. Yeah.
And I think one reason why this you can feel negativity or like dread in our field is because when it comes down to it, oh, the creativity, oh, it's fun. Nobody cares, okay? Like in the real world, nobody gives a crap about how much you like to solve your problem. Do you move the business far? And do you move it further? If you do, great. And if you don't, you lose. And it's like a reckoning of, was this ever real work? It was because of the product of humanity and where we were in technology. Yes, it was real work. Now, is it real work? Arguably, that surface area has like drastically reduced. And I think it's that feeling of people going, wow, my work now no longer is like real work. And there is some validity to that. It's just like, sorry, suck it up.
I guess, I don't know if this is it's like a counterpoint, but in a lot of the discourse I'm seeing online, I guess I can't speak to if people are like quitting and finding different teams or whatever. I don't have data or even like strong like anecdotal evidence there. But I think that there is this kind of, we had all these practices and like ways of writing code, and like we had this like code review process, and there was an expectation of people knowing things and like having a firm understanding of every change they make, and certain abstractions that were good. When you'd remove like redundant code versus leaving it to ensure separation of concerns were there. And it's kind of, okay, we've decided none of that actually matters. And we're just all going to play like fast and loose now. And I think that is like blowing up in people's faces, like as we were talking to on our last
yeah, Amazon.
You're right. So there's like this kind of strife, I think, that a lot of people are feeling, where it's like, hey guys, wait a minute. Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater here in trying to move faster? We're like developing systems that we can't really maintain, or we hit this like diminishing returns point where it's no one really understands this, and we try to touch any of it and it breaks, or we end up having to redo the whole code base, and we're crossing our fingers again that we vibed this piece correctly this time. So I think that there is just this like, even devs that are trying to embrace the tooling, but they're not seeing this kind of balance for the tribal knowledge that had been gained in the last 20 years of software development. It's just like that frustration, I think, is causing a lot of people to feel this burnout right now.
Yeah. And it feels like we know what the bottleneck is now, and it's not writing the code, it's reviewing the code.
Exactly. Yeah.
And people just cannot review faster because we're human. We can't spin up sub-agents. We can't have multiple parallel threads of thought looking at different pieces of code. Amazon's fix for now is more human review, but is this the right response? It's not a sustainable response, probably. They're going to have quotas that they want to hit, and people are just not going to be able to keep up unless you hire more people. And what are we doing with AI? We're getting rid of people. What are you going to do if you're an engineering organization and you know that this is the give and take or the tug for right now?
I also feel like just Amazon is the worst example of that organization you just mentioned, Paige. Like, Amazon is the bottom of the barrel in terms of being able to be fast and loose and ship something effectively. And just because they had disaster doesn't mean like other engineering organizations are like, oh my gosh, if we go all into AI, like this is what's going to happen. There's a lot of things that affect if this is going to work for you or not. Like the tribal knowledge argument. What if your code base started around the time that Claude Code came out? You could engineer it from the beginning up to actually work in these systems, to build these. There's hooks, there's ways that you can check things if you have a strongly typed system. Look at Stripe. I'll go back to their Minion example. They're currently, right now, they're shipping like 1,300 PRs a week successfully, doing global payments code because of this Minion system that Amazon tried to do, but they obviously messed up. So if you're an organization and you're wondering like, oh, what should we do here? I just think it's where do you put your effort? Is it in the models and the IDE and everything? Or are you like re-engineering the platform of how you ship work? Because it sounds like Amazon took this IDE, put it on. They were like, all right, here's the process. We're going to bake in all these steps. Whereas Stripe, they were like, we're going to build a platform. Okay, we're going to build a platform. There's these minions. There's all these rules built around them. And you can use VS Code if you're working with Stripe and you can call up to the minion, but it's in an orchestrated platform environment. It's just two different philosophies about how they're doing this process, because it is process at the end of the day. I just feel like Amazon's the worst example, and it really comes down to, is your code base AI ready? Because I would say maybe Amazon wasn't, and they never got to the point of maybe being AI ready. Stripe sounds like they put in a lot more effort there.
Yeah, I feel Amazon's also solving a much wider array of problems. As our AI impulses grow, it's like I feel the flows that are much more like data in, data out. I want to observe what external calls were made. Like the kind of work that a lot of what Stripe is doing is like agentic tools are very good at that because it's easy to like verify changes, right? You can like have the flow run and see, I made this change and it fixed the bug, that I can select which part of the test suite I need to run. Versus the breadth of Amazon's code base is just like huge. So I'm sure it's hard to get it into a loop where it can validate itself and all that stuff.
That's so right. Because one reason Stripes work so well is they have 1.3 million unit tests, or like some crazy million. And yeah, to Noel's point, they can probably figure out what subset of these tests need to be run and run them every time for every PR versus Amazon. I just have no idea. That's a really good point. Yeah, it just depends so much on what your organization is, where you're pointing the laser, like how ready are you? Yeah, the Amazon story is actually, be scared, please. If you're an engineering manager, be scared of it. Yes, just don't think that this is like the sign of, oh, it's not going to work. Yeah.
Here's a question for you, though. If you were to restart your career today and the job is basically reviewing code, you get into software engineering? Is that fun?
I also feel like reviewing, I don't know if I completely agree that it's all reviewing code and that's where we're going. I feel like we are headed towards requirement specification. And reviewing code is right now a majority share of the work because we're not ready as an industry. And so we're fixing and teeing up and going back and rerunning in the review stage versus we're going to gravitate over the next couple of years towards requirement specification, opinion gathering, doing as many human loops before you give the AI this 3,000 line document and hit go. So right now, Jack, no, this sounds terrible. I wouldn't recommend anybody.
I'm not even sure if I like the whole requirements gathering thing, because I mean, I've been in those meetings like for 8 hours, like going through, like talking about, here's this Word document and they just keep blah, 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 blah. And I was like, should we say this is should or must or could? Oh my God. I just want to code, man. I just want to see stuff actually happen in the real world. And that's why I got into this. Like, I didn't get into this to sit around and review documents or review somebody else's code or review the reviewer's code. And at the end of this, if CodeRabbit does all the PR review for you, and you've got the agent going and building those specs and all that, and you're just everything's review, then really the only job you have in the system is two things. One, review, and three, they can't blame the agent when things go wrong, but they can blame you as a human. And so you are basically the outlet of blame. That's the job. Reviewing stuff and being a blame target. And I don't like...
That's a very natural progression, though. There's a lot of career and jobs in this world where your value is the guarantor. You are the fall. The buck stops with you in whatever industry, in insurance and signing. And I know it sucks, Jack. I'm just drawing an analog.
Like, just God, yeah. That sounds awful. It sounds awful.
Yeah. I mean, the It's really hard to turn down the money still, because if you're an engineer, you're especially if you're in the US, you're most likely making a lot more money than you would in many other industries, save being a lawyer or a doctor or something else that requires a lot of schooling and a lot of pre-preparation. But at the same time, I very much identify with what you're saying, Jack. Like, I got into this because I liked to build things and see them come to life and bring ideas through my own work or my own brain into fruition. And now and this kind of ties into my rant, but it almost seems more like if you're a subject matter expert in a particular domain and you have an idea of how to make that domain better, you can do that now. You don't need to have a software engineer who can build it for you. You're like, I know the publishing industry really well, or I know how whatever construction works in this particular way. If you know that, it almost seems like you could get to the point where you build something that is useful for that industry. And it's not just that you have a software degree, so you know how to how to hook JavaScript up to HTML and CSS. You know the particular pain points of an industry, and now you can vibe code your way into a really useful product, platform, tool that you can sell and monetize.
And monetization, that it really comes down to what is the motivating factor. Like for Jack loves to create things. Paige, you love to create things. I like to create things too. But at the end of the day, the younger we're going to get of people entering this field after the AI revolution, call it, people are doing this for money. If anybody's in here because you like to create things, guess what? There's somebody that likes to do this for money and they don't give a crap. And it's because Paige said there's going to be somebody in construction, who's just going to know how to do it. And they don't care about the art of code. They actually want, when you talk to the business folk, the VP, they're just like, stop. I don't want to hear about the code. How does this move the needle? That's what everybody's going to feel. Money is a good motivator.
I would say that has been the progression since I got into this. Like when I started, this was something you did out of love. People were not getting mega salaries for doing software. It was not that. And then I'd say 20 years in, it was suddenly software engineers, like you could do that it's like a doctor or a lawyer, software engineer, that kind of thing. And so you saw a lot of folks get into it because they're like, yeah, I'm doing this for the money and I want to be in a management position and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. Just got used to that. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm not excited about it.
I know there's going to be somebody in business that's willing to do it for the money and then take the art out of it. And they're just going to move the needle heavier than you. Yay. In some way, like musicians, when they're like, man, like everybody's like going to Suno AI and they're printing out music and they're just like, this all sucks and everything. But now they have this little bubble of their life where I'm going to go make music for fun. I don't know about you guys. Jack, you said on your this last podcast that you did something just for fun, for shits and giggles. So I'm doing all of that too, to keep the love in it. You have to.
I think that's it. I think that's it today, is like you have to do something because you want to, for your own intrinsic value, not because it's going to make you money. Like I really like making art, and AI can make way more art, way better, way faster than me, but I want to learn to paint and paint better. So I'm painting. And it's like, it takes longer. It takes me weeks to finish something because I only can work on it for 20, 30 minutes a day tops. But I really get a sense of satisfaction because I painted this thing myself at the end.
Yeah. I think the arts are also like an interesting thing because I feel like increasingly so now there's such blowback. I don't want to go to a gallery and look at art that people prompted. Like musicians make the Suno argument, but I don't really care to listen to music that is just prompted. If I did, I'd just go prompt it myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to look at someone else's prompting. If I need art to realize some vision, whatever it may be, I'll do it myself. But if I'm like wanting to consume, but that feels like a very different thing than like the science of coding, like trying to like an engineering pursuit as a means to an end feels like a very different thing.
I guess I always thought of, and I took a lot of pride in the idea of engineering as an art, and I know actually it's funny when I first got into a debate about it is when my wife was in college and we were hanging out with a bunch of theater folks and they were like, that is not an art. It is not a thing that is called an art. And there's painting, there's theater, there's all this stuff. And it's like, those are arts. And then I looked up the Oxford English Dictionary word for art, the definition of art. And it was any essentially craft taken to an extreme. Like you get into that is artful, right? And so if you really get into the quality of software and the quality of code, then that's an art. And I like that. I took pride in my art and the architecture of it.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about like when we talk about quality of code and maintain like it feels like these are things that are like the code is elegant to look at, maintain, understand. It's relatively logically sound. You can like go through it and like it does all of the things for us. And that's what I like to my prior point of the frustration in that like we had all of these mechanisms and tools and this whole language for talking about like code that we could understand. And we knew there was like not weird side effects and all this stuff. And again, like we're not even talking about it anymore. It's just like we've all kind of moved on. So like that I think is the core of this strife between the art of code. It's no like doing things that we've been doing forever because we know it's sound and maintainable and scalable and all these things, but it's not as quick. And it never has been. Like this is just a very rapid acceleration of the like, where does one fall on this line of get the thing out the door versus do a little bit of craft here to make this a thing that we can build and scale and maintain.
I've wondered to myself more than once lately if there's going to be like some shops that pop up that are all about artisanal code that are like, that will say, we handwrite all of our code still. We deliver a lot less, obviously. We're not the mainstream, but if you want a bespoke, handmade website, we're the people to come to. Kind of when you're getting salvage denim or you're buying something that is basically the old way of doing it, not the mass-produced way. Is that going to become a thing for coding, maybe?
Wait, I know what you're talking about, though. Yeah, I was actually with a friend just over the weekend, and they were going to a bike store and getting some stuff on their bike. And there were the mass manufactured parts, and then there was literally a particular Chris King or something like that makes this particular bike parts, and it's all hand custom made kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that's cool. That's a bike part, but I'm not sure that applies to code so much.
Bike parts seem different than, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's a weird one.
Code.
Yeah. We see this everywhere, right? It's like from everything. It's like arts and like culinary craft and like all these things. It's the same thing. I feel code is much more of a commodity. It's like an engineering field that's a means to an end. So I can't imagine there's much of that. Maybe in a very cottage boutique-y way, but I don't know.
To me, it's like we're talking about hand refining gasoline or just buying it from Saudi Arabia and putting it in our cars. I'm like, nobody even wants to have this conversation. They just want the gas.
Yeah.
And we're in like some weird cave echo chamber here, thinking people care about how the gas is made, or even what wars need to get start to obtain it.
I think you're right. I think there's just not enough of an industry that cares about the artisanal craft of code, the way that we like to talk about it, the elegant code. There's eloquent JavaScript, for goodness sake. There's an entire book that is dedicated to just writing better code. And at this point in time, I think that's such a moot point that it's not even all the O'Reilly authors. I feel so bad for them because everything that they've written, I don't think anybody's consuming it anymore. Any human. Yeah. The AIs have already consumed it years ago, so they're fine. They know it.
Content is a whole new area around this, or a whole issue on its own. What content makes sense in this world? This kind of content, I think, makes sense because it's for humans by humans talking about the impact of AI in their field. And I don't know if any AI is going to care enough to actually read through the transcript of this and be like, okay, engineers are trying to internalize what this means for themselves. Great, good for them. Now I'm going to go on and do my Claude Code thing. But yeah, like trying to figure out the ramifications of it. I think about the shift from folks who would do like manual metalwork, like in the old days, putting together bolts and all that kind of stuff manually. And then nowadays, like everybody does this with CNC, and it has become all about programming the CNC machines. And you take satisfaction in the fact that, my CNC pattern can be used to mill like 1 million parts. And that's cool, right? And so maybe that's the thing. Maybe the idea here is that we just have to learn how to take satisfaction in the AI and in using these tools in a cool way. And like you just move the satisfaction point somewhere else. And if you can't do that, you just get out of the game, because I'm sure there's a bunch of folks who like hand milled stuff and are like, yeah, I don't want to learn how to code CNC. So I'm peace out, bro. I'm going to go and, I don't know, whatever, do marlin fishing or whatever.
I like that analogy, Jack. It feels, because it's very it's very product focused, that analogy. It's like the end product that we all care about is the refined metal piece.
Yeah.
And if you can center your emotions around like wanting to make the best and the best cut like end pieces, you're fine. You can find satisfaction. But if you like milling, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to get out of my milling space.
We've talked about this topic for quite a bit. So let's talk about another one that's also agent related. Agents running while you sleep, and the verification problem that we've already been hitting on. Autonomous coding agents aren't a future concern anymore. Obviously, they're running in production today. And a piece this week came out from Claude Code Camp, which describes teams merging 40 to 50 AI-generated PRs a week, with agents shipping changes to branches their human authors haven't even read. The author's core observation: when the same AI writes code and writes a test for that code, you get self-congratulation machines, which I think we've all definitely seen. They'll tell you straight to your face that it's fixed when it's not. It checks its own assumptions, not basically. So the proposed solution borrows from test-driven development, where you write acceptance criteria in plain English before you prompt the agent. Then you use a separate verification process, like Playwright agents probably, to check outcomes against those criteria. The idea is that you review failures, not diffs, and it's a compelling workflow, but it raises the harder question of where the human judgment fits in a world where agents are running while you sleep. So I think that we've all discussed this, but have you hit personally the I have no idea if what this agent shipped is any good scenario, and what are you doing to try and mitigate that?
I can speak for my team of 8 because we do participate in ZTE. I'm going to take that term from YouTube, zero touch engineering. Not everything, but there are things that I would make Jack wince, like you just did, for those who are listening and not watching, about somebody who would never read a branch and then ship it to production. We do that, but there's requirements. In order for you to fall into that category of doing a ZTE ship, there's things that need to be in place. And a human needs to decide that. What intelligence are you using? Where are you pointing it? What's the scope of the requirements? Some things need to be checked. And then when that goes out, like, we're monorepo people, right? So what packages got touched? What apps got touched? Where do we need to spawn Playwright agents? What is the minimum key success criteria? Borders don't overlap. Text doesn't overlap. These core pages load. There's things that you can check to do that. And then you're like, okay, so then what does the human do as that surface area grows? The human is gathering requirements. They're doing that awful Google Doc process that we all hate, but it's really important. And then they're directing intelligence in the right bite-sized areas in the right spots. And it's just like that general ceremony of gathering and directing the intelligence is just going to grow. And to me, that's like the main human surface area as ZTE expands.
So for you, it's more about understanding what are the features that we want to add and directing the agents toward creating and implementing those features.
Yeah, honestly, in breaking down the features, I don't think we're at a point yet where we can just take a feature ticket or something like that, throw it at a set of minions and get a ZTE set of branches shipped in. Like, not yet. The human needs to sit with Claude Code, great colleague, break this thing down into a PRD, break it down into tickets, and then one by one, the human is going to orchestrate the sending of these tickets. And then one of those might take overnight. It might, because you need to spawn up browsers. There's 17 different user flows, and every Playwright flow can take 5 to 10 minutes to test. So but that balance of where does the human break it down? How small do they break it down? What intelligence can you orchestrate versus what's automatic? That's always going to be changing. So I don't know where we'll be in 6 months, but that surface area, that gelatinous space of humans orchestrating things is where we sit right now.
All I know is the Anthropic CEO is like drooling over those statements, because that's how you get your 250K token usage every year, is just Uber alles, agents for everything, agents monitoring agents and all that. And that's how we keep this spinning ball of AI running.
Do something with all these data centers.
I guess so. They're all looking at each other's code. Yeah. I think I would kind of also add on like a mission criticality to it. I'm okay if you want a ZTE, like some text changes on a doc, on a page, fine, whatever, go for it. But if it's like ZTEing, I don't know, like a unit test overhaul or something like that, we're gonna spend some time with that. We're gonna look at it.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued when I read about organizations and how they're determining what tests need to be run for what set of changes. And like that kind of like, that's always been a somewhat tricky problem. And this is the one that I run into when I'm doing more agentic coding right now. It's like where there will be weird side effects to things, or like things will break unexpectedly, and like some other view that it needed to make a change on that ended up calling something 2 layers deep or something. It's, oh, this utility function that's called by something that's called by something ended up breaking this other view, and like catching those and figuring out when to run a subset of your suite for those kinds of changes. Because I think a human is, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe this depends on the person. But I think that's kind of stuff's a lot easier when you have a code base like Stripes, like we were talking about earlier, where there's like rigorous unit tests at every level of abstraction throughout the code base, versus it being more like a code base that's more integration test heavy. If you're not running that full suite on every change, it can be easier for stuff to slip through the cracks. Yeah, I'm keeping my ear to the ground a little bit for like tools and processes as teams are figuring that out, because I feel like that's the crux of this problem. Like, how do you figure out what needs to be verified when? So it's not like for every little, if I make a styling change, I don't need to run a playwright agent suite that costs 200,000 tokens for a one character change in a label or something. But
yeah, and that's definitely a weakness, Noel. If we do a CSS change, damn sure, like we're running the whole playwright shebang.
That's what
the
I'm
whole
saying,
engine's
yeah.
going to boot up. Yeah. And it's just like, it has to be that way. How else could it be? Like, me to leave an agent to decide whether to run playwright or not is heinous in my eyes.
But like even in that Stripe blog post, they're talking about how like depending on the changes, subsets of tests run. And it's okay. Like how, like what is your guys' membrane there? Because I feel like that's just a super interesting kind of code architecture problem.
I also think that have you guys seen Andre Karpathy's auto research?
No.
I'm not
Okay,
sure.
this came out like last month or a few weeks ago. The idea is he had an LLM get trained and then redo the training, reset the hyperparameters, whatever, until it was damn good. It was a mini large language model. And he did this by having Claude have one thesis, make a score, propose a change, and then if the score moved over that next training, and if it didn't work, he'd revert. And so you have Claude sitting on top of maybe 3 or 4 other Claudes, and then driving Git with one proposal and then changing it. Like, I tried this. I tried it not with a large language model. I was developing software and I was like, okay, Claude, we're going to make a video script and you're going to have these like other 12 Claudes judge based on like continuous speech, make sure like it flows, make sure it's like good for YouTube shorts, blah, 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 blah. And they're failing. Now Claude is like going, oh, this is fail. Let's fix it and repeat. Now I'm sure you could do the same thing with tests. We have tests. You have some sort of Claude that distills a test at first. It's going to suck. You have a human, you go in. It's just basic like Bayesian smoothing or whatever. Like, you make hypotheses, you look at what actually happened, you bring the data back in, and next time it's going to be better. And like, this whole dance is now starting to happen with AI. So if you can, once again, get your requirements down, make a score out of it, feed it back into the system, yeah, it's going to get better. To the point where it's writing me YouTube short scripts. Like, how can you teach an AI to be suave? No, it taught itself, which is kind of weird. I bet it could do it for tests too.
What was the initial input on that? Be suave.
No, I said you need to maintain the TikTok style ADHD emotional gravitational pull throughout the video. I just focused on ADHD the whole time. Like,
yeah, emotional gravitational
let these people
pull.
supple from like the little mouse feeder.
Yeah. Optimize for brain rot.
Yep.
It's funny. I took a Stanford course on gamification once, and half the course was you should really be careful about using this because you can impact humans in terrible ways with this kind of with gamification. And now you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and like hone and train an LLM to make stuff that's going to reduce a human's attention span. Awesome.
Accelerate that.
Let's go. Let's accelerate that, please. Because
What can I
that's
say?
taking us to a
I'm
great
zoomer.
point in this world.
It's very interesting to see how large language models are being meta on top of each other to train them to do things that like are very esoteric, like creating brain rot. But I give this
and
in
I did
because
this
I'm sure
actually
it could
just
do for
recently
tests.
because I needed to have 2 side-by-side versions of like using tools and using code mode and then compare the output of both. And yeah, I used Claude to be the judge of these 2 outputs to say versus like a known good and say, cool, this was good, this was bad. It wasn't actually changing the behavior at all, though. This is just more like smoke testing kind of thing.
So do you think that this actually changes the velocity argument a little bit. We've been talking so much about requirements gathering and making sure that the tests are good up front or the criteria is really strict and solid and thought out. So if you're spending all this time upfront planning and writing and adding guardrails and catch-alls and rules and stuff like that, are we actually shipping code faster in the end? I think the answer is still yes, because it feels that way, but I don't know if that's just my personal feeling about how it works versus is it actually shipping faster?
That's a tough
We're
one.
definitely in a weird spot where we're sharpening pickaxes or mining at the same time. So it's like hard to judge how effective the sharpness of my pickaxe is because I keep going back and working on it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing, I've deployed probably 12 apps last month, and not like they're making money, but not for me and not for like my mom because she wanted to like have something that checks her email and ranks her email. It's just like things. There's things that I just couldn't create that are now created. I'm starting a YouTube Shorts channel. Like I would say it's faster.
Yeah, that actually brings up another question. How would you define a senior engineer, or like those different levels and strata of engineers that we've had forever? Because typically it means you have a certain level of mastery over a coding language or understanding larger architectural problems or things. But if you're not the one who's writing the code anymore, like how do we classify engineers? What do we use to set them at these different levels that we've known in the past?
Well, I think the whole senior engineer thing for me has always been like junior engineers focus on the code, like the actual like mechanics of the code, and because they're working at that level. And then as you go up the engineering chain, you're working with product more, you're working at a higher level of architecture and that kind of thing. So I think it says to me that like the folks that are going to gain the most from AI are senior engineers. And that's actually ending up being the case. And unfortunately, we're losing the entry points for a lot of junior engineers, which is incredibly short-sighted on the part of, I don't know, software engineering writ large, because at a certain point, a lot of folks are going to take their vibe-coded app, make their millions, and be like, okay, that was fun. Peace out. And then that's it. You don't have you still need people to review the code. You still need people to actually understand all this stuff. You still need people to actually put together a decent prompt that says, here's the architecture I want you to follow, or be able to review the architecture that it comes up with. Yeah, it's tough. But I think those monikers still stand. Back to your original point.
Building out the team that is making the music app now, junior engineers have been the focus actually, and not necessarily a software, but like people who are like, yeah, I've done, or maybe have a bachelor's in computer science or some sort of degree, but I got my master's or my accelerated blah in insert this music industry. I want you. You know why? Because we're going to give you Claude Code, and the slip layer between somebody being a senior engineer and then talking to you, all of that waste is gone. Because you're doing it now, and there's a senior engineer, whether it be me, whether it be the other one senior engineer we have, controlling the harness, making sure things are like shipped correctly. So our team is mostly juniors, people who are subject matter experts, like how Paige insinuated beforehand, that are being enabled with the tools. And they're like a junior engineer now. Like they're young, they're fresh out of college, they're not sure what to do with their degree, but man, we can make them like very effective in the workplace. To be fair, that's not a software junior engineer though, right? That's like the whole point is they have a specialty in something else. And so there's also, they're not going to spend 4 years learning about proofs, you know?
Yeah,
I don't know what the impact of that will be.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like if your music app, right? You want to go and charge people money for that. And you want to have a certain level of privacy to their music that they create so that nobody steals it or whatever. I don't know what those sort of things. When does a senior engineer go into the mix to say, hey, when we build this API, it has to have this level of auth and it can only be accessible from these points because here's the overall architecture and here's those guardrails. Because what we're seeing is an issue with a lot of this AI stuff is that security vulnerabilities are really the big issues coming out of this. I think there was one just recently where all of the documents that these folks had uploaded, and these are like IRS documents and yada, were all just basically exposed to the open web with a simple token that anybody could get, and everybody shared the same token. So there you go. Would it? Yeah, somebody needs to be in the process somewhere to make sure that doesn't happen.
Always a role, space, and necessity for a senior engineer. Like, it's just compressed instead of needing like their reach of looking at that stuff is much farther.
So maybe it's less now about a specific area of expertise at that level, but more about a broad T-shaped engineer that we've talked about in the past, where it's like you need to know a decent amount about infrastructure and security and best practices and X, Y, and Z. So less of a specialist, more of a generalist, but at a higher level.
Yeah, it's like the bar was raised a little bit, honestly, for that role. If you want to be a real senior engineer on a team like that, yeah, the bar is raised.
And the bar is also raised because you have to be more of a communicator than you have had to in the past. It was one of those things where I met a bunch of principal and architects level folks over the years. And these are folks that basically the dollar band to retain them was just the level up, right? And so they didn't gain any additional skills. They just had to go to be a principal because that's how we pay them. HR says you can't pay a senior engineer that much, kind of thing. And they didn't learn the requisite skills that you need really to go from senior to principal to architect or whatever, which are communication skills, which are those abilities to have those thoughts about or come up with those designs for the architecture and then communicate them to all of the junior engineers and the teams and do it in a way where you answer all their questions and make sure that the documentation is all up to date and all that stuff, right? Those skills are really important in the agentic age because that's how you talk to these LLMs. You have to learn those communication skills. So that is actually cool in my book.
I would agree with that, Jack. It's like this special sauce that you need, intersection between being technical and communicative.
Cool. I would keep all day, but we've almost come up on an hour already talking about these two topics. So let's do a quick ad break and then we'll do some hot takes. This episode is brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. All right, Noel, would you like to give us your first hot take for this episode?
Yeah, sure. My hot take is I think there's several big problems here that we talked about, lack of junior engineers and all these things that LLMs are going to precipitate. I think this is a weird one, but I'm worried about the long-term efficacy of a lot of open source projects. I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this like death of a lot of SaaS companies because people just vibe code things internally. I think we're also going to see that kind of death of open source a little bit because people are like, maintaining an open source project, I think now is a large successful one is really difficult because of so much junk that people are just like putting up for PRs and stuff that have obviously not been written by a human. And these open source maintainers don't want to just push that code to all of their dependents. And then like for small stuff, I think there's just going to be an increasing discoverability problem as there is more and more junk just pushed. So I'm worried about this kind of lack of, clear winners, I guess, in like open source places. Okay, like this is the open source library used for requests if you're using Node or whatever. So I'm worried we're going to have a little bit of a dry spell there, or I don't know. This will be maybe just the death of kind of the history of open source as we've known it. And that's one that I'm worried about. And I feel like all these repo maintainers are like putting out blog posts and stuff now because they're like, we don't know what to do. Anyway.
Oh, that's a good one. Jack, what's your hot take for this week?
My hot take is that USB-C sucks, to be honest. Like, it was supposed to be this, like, really cool, like, single cable to rule them all. And because now it got 18 different versions of USB-C, like, power only, all the way up to the crazy, can't be more than 6 foot Thunderbolt 5 cable, blah, blah, blah. And they're, like all these little details. It's no. Like, we went to IKEA, and my wife's like, here's this, like, bin of USB-C cables, and she's like, we'll never need USB-C cables again. We could just buy all these ones that are like $1.40. I'm like, I could go into a whole diatribe about why these USB-C cables suck, but even I don't understand, really, to be honest, like all the different freaking standards.
That's a great one. I've had this whole thing too. There's a huge iconography and functional problem in the USB standard, where it's you don't know you plug in a thing with a battery to another thing that's got a battery. It's like, which way's power going to flow? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
This is all controlled by software. Yeah, it's
and then HDMI runs over it. My kid is a hardware engineer, and we went over to Apple, and they were like, USB-C is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
there's too much stuff going across this cable.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
All right, Paul, what's your hot take for this week?
I love the USB-C one. Felt very hard. I've been looking a lot into the defense situation with Anthropic and OpenAI. I think it's being blown out of proportion in the sense that they are both equally terrible. They would both kill people just without knowing it. And the nuances of how these models are deployed really matter. Like, which servers are they running on? Who controls the servers? Like, what monitoring is on those servers? And there's differences between OpenAI and the contract with the Defense Department and with Anthropic. Those matter. It really matters. And for people to put Anthropic on this pedestal after this happened, yes, it was nice that they did stand up. That was a reaction. This is part 2 of the hot take. That was reactionary because of things that happened that they're not going to let us know about, that Anthropic had a hand in terms of the current situation in the global geopolitics. So yeah, don't be praising Anthropic, people. I love Anthropic. Cloud Code's my main driver, but just like they're equally terrible to Sammy, okay?
Most people don't have a weapon sitting on top of LLM or whatever. But if you're using like LLMs to do like HR stuff, don't do that. That's not what they're designed. That's not what it's designed to do, right? It's designed to predict the next token based on some prompt. That's all it is. It looks like it's smart, but it's not. And to say, cool, let's go and decide our targeting of F-117s based on this LLM is insane.
Like, just exactly. And just remember, Anthropic was doing that. They were doing that. So don't act like Anthropic's anti-war. Okay, that's it. That's my hot take.
Nice one. My hot take is going to come back to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, where I think it's a lot less today about what we can build and a lot more about what we should build or what taste tells us we should build. Because now we can build anything. We can vibe it into existence. We can make pretty much whatever you want at this point. So it comes down to a lot more of what is actually useful to be built. What should we be putting our time towards? What should we be building? So I think that's like the next frontier for engineers is leveling up your taste and being better about making those sorts of recommendations to your product manager or to understanding what your users are telling you they want or they need, and being able to then build that based on that kind of experience and that kind of level of taste instead of level of effort or how quickly can we get this out, because we could probably get it out pretty darn quick. And it's more about what should we be getting out. So
Totally agree.
Become a tastemaker.
Yes, exactly.
Artisanal code.
Exactly. High quality. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Noel, for being here. And thank you to everybody who listened to this episode of LogRocket. We will see you on the next episode.